This episode is brought to you by Hasa. Liquid is clearly better. Liquid chlorine is the highest purity, works immediately, has no added cyanuric acid or calcium, and it will leave your pool safe, clean, and clear. And by the Bottom Feeder professional grade battery powered vacuum system. It sucks to clean pools, so cleaning pools sucks less. Get $100 off with code DVB100.
This episode is brought to you by Skimmer, the #1 pool service software in North America. With Skimmer, you can streamline your schedule, grow your revenue, and keep your customers coming back with 5-star service. Whether you're a one-person operation or an established team, Skimmer is your partner in success. Visit getskimmer.com/poolguy to try Skimmer for free for 30 days.
The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show. The Pool Guy Podcast Show.
Hi, welcome to the Pool Guy Podcast Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk to you about the true cost of algae in pools on your pool route. As we begin to start the season, I think it's really important to address this, especially now, so you can take proactive action to prevent algae in the pools that you service. Are you a pool service pro looking to take your business to the next level? Join the Pool Guy Coaching Program. Get expert advice, business tips, exclusive content, and get direct support from me. I'm a 35-year veteran in the industry. Whether you're starting out or scaling up, I've got the tools to help you succeed. Learn more at swimmingpoollearning.com. I'll start with the big two problems that arise with algae in pools, and then I'll, of course, get into some more things that you have to be aware of. The first two big ones, I think, are loss of trust in your business is one of them, and two is the time that it consumes out there when you're fighting algae in pools. Now, I'll give you some preventative tips as well to kind of help mitigate algae in pools, but these two are the biggest kind of fallout when you have algae in pools. And if you do this for a living and you've been out there long enough, you know that the worst thing, especially in the summer when it's 90 or 100 degrees out, is getting to a pool where you have mustard algae on the walls of the pool, especially if it's really hard to brush it off. Sometimes it's really aggressive and it's really on the plaster, and you have to use a little 5 or 6 inch stainless steel brush, and you're out there sweating, going, inch by inch basically on the plaster to brush the algae. It's really frustrating and extremely time consuming. So if you have 2 pools out of 15 or 14 that day that have algae, you've added like 20, 30 minutes to your day plus frustration. You have that over the course of a week, 10 or 12 pools with algae in them, and you're brushing and treating them. This really slows you down and increases the frustration at the same time. But time is money, and the more time you're spending out there brushing a pool that has algae, treating it, the less money you're making out there. And you're really losing money in the long run because you're treating the pool, you're adding extra chemicals, you're adding an algicide. All of this, of course, affects your bottom line. Now, the only time that you can really pass these charges on to a customer is if, let's say they left the pool in spa mode all week and then the pool had algae in it. But a lot of times you really can't tell the customer, or you can't, blame it on the customer in a lot of respects, saying the pool had algae, therefore I'm going to have to charge you extra for this, because they're going to, of course, say something like, well, I'm paying you to take care of the pool. Why is there algae in there, and why do I have to pay for it? So you have to be really careful that it has to be a concrete cause by the customer that you can pass the charges on to them, which is not something that's very typical. A lot of times there's other factors that create the algae in the pool. Now, of course, when it's seasonal and you have an oak tree with pollen falling in there, the customer will understand perfectly that that's because of the pollen. Algae was blooming in the pool, and therefore the extra chemical cost and treatment is something that they will absorb. And the loss of trust is the other aspect when you have algae in the pool. It's one of those things where your job is to keep the pool blue and swim ready. And when a customer sees algae in the pool, for some reason they get freaked out. Now, of course, algae can harbor bacteria. We found that out. But most of the time the algae in the pool is relatively benign. It's just unsightly and you swim in the lake, you swim in a pond, I guess you swim in a pond. It has algae in it. It doesn't really affect you too much. So it's just one of those things where optically the algae looks bad in the pool. Now, when you lose this trust in the customer, getting it back takes a long time sometimes, especially if you're having trouble clearing up the algae. You can find some causes of the algae, of course, as well when you get a pool with algae in it. But a lot of the times the customer doesn't really pay attention when you explain to them why the pool is algae. All they know is that the pool is algae and it should not have algae. Most customers, when the pool has algae reoccurring in the pool, get really frustrated with the pool service, and they may even switch services. I've taken over pools before where the algae problem has been the main reason why they switch service. So losing pools or service accounts because of algae in the pool is a very common thing, and you want to, of course, avoid this by eliminating algae in pools, which, of course, can almost be one of those things when I say you can have a pool route without algae. In most cases, there's a lot of truth to that. In some cases, algae is unavoidable, like I mentioned, when the oak trees are pollinating, or if the pool has some kind of problem that's not caused by the customer, algae can bloom in the pool. Let's say that the filter is impacted and it's not circulating well, some algae forming in the corner. A lot of the times when you have algae in the pool, one of the mistakes that we make out there is we don't take it as seriously as we should take it. In other words, let's say you're at a pool, there's a little bit of algae on the step area, maybe some in the spa, and maybe a streak in the corner of the pool. So you don't really take it as something major a lot of the time. So you'll brush the step, you'll brush the wall. In the old days, we used to just take our sodium bromide, take the 4 ounces of that with a gallon of liquid chlorine, pour it over the spot, and call it a day. Now, of course, you have to understand that if you don't treat the algae aggressively, and you just kind of maybe raise the chlorine level from 5 parts per million to 10 parts per million, and you don't really treat it that aggressively, the algae could actually spread even with a good chlorine level in the pool. I had this one account that I was doing for a while. Of course, I dropped it because it was a real headache. But this account was a pool that really had pitted plaster. It was not really in great shape, and it had a really old filter. And this was a person that was on a fixed income. They didn't have a lot of money. The filter wasn't that great, so I replaced it with a used filter. I had a Jan DD filter on the side of my house that I put in there. That helped a little bit and improved it, but it was the plaster surface itself that was the main problem. Whenever the chlorine level dropped to a certain point, and I'll touch on Bob Lowry's formula in a second here, it would cause algae to form in the pool. And I didn't really know what was going on. The chlorine level was pretty high, but the algae would form and it would get into the pits in the plaster and be a real problem. Fortunately, she didn't really care how the pool looked because she knew that it was old and it wasn't a big deal. But for me, it was very frustrating to get there and have to brush algae and treat it. And with Bob Lowry's formula, a pool, even with a good chlorine level, can get algae in it because there is a cyanuric acid to free chlorine ratio that needs to be maintained and achieved. So basically, the formula, to keep it simple, you need to have a free chlorine at the minimum of 7.5% of the cyanuric acid level. Now, the cyanuric acid, or CYA, in the pool is there to protect the chlorine from being burned off rapidly by the sun's UV rays. However, a larger or higher amount of cyanuric acid in the water causes the chlorine to be less effective and slows down its ability to actually work in the pool. So let's just say that your cyanuric acid level is at 80 parts per million. So if you do the formula, 7.5% of 80 is 6. And so your parts per million in that pool should be at 6 parts per million daily to make the chlorine effective and prevent algae from growing. And that's the minimum amount of chlorine, by the way. And that's a daily amount of chlorine to prevent the pool from the algae from growing and spreading in the pool. But if your cyanuric acid is at 160, you're going to need 12 parts per million of free chlorine to make that effective and prevent algae in the pool. That's why a lot of times you get to a pool, the chlorine level is at 5 parts per million. You still see algae in the corner, and you're scratching your head thinking, why is there algae in the pool? The chlorine level is great. It's because it should be at 6 parts per million, but the cyanuric acid is at 80 parts per million. So this is really something to be aware of because, of course, there is chlorine-resistant algae out there, but there's also a free chlorine level that needs to be maintained to prevent algae in the pools. Once you understand this formula, it goes a long way in preventing algae in pools, and it's going to make life a lot easier out there for you. So again, the higher the cyanuric acid level in the pool, logically speaking, based on this formula, the higher the free chlorine level needs to be maintained in that pool to make the chlorine effective. Again, once you understand this formula and the correlation between high cyanuric acid and a higher free chlorine level necessary, the amount of algae in your pools on your route is going to drop significantly. And the Pool Guy Podcast Show has teamed up with UPA to bring you affordable, reliable liability insurance starting at just $64 a month. Get up to $2 million in coverage, and the members of my coaching group get an even lower rate. Protect your business and your peace of mind. Sign up with UPA today by clicking the link in the podcast description. Another important aspect of pool care is brushing the pool on a weekly basis when you're there. This will prevent a lot of algae from forming in the pool. If you brush the walls, the step area, any dead areas of the pool, and consistently brush the pool each week you're there, you're going to find a lot less algae in the pool. So the formula of the 7.5% of free chlorine to cyanuric acid, brushing the pools every week also helps tremendously. And then another element is the runtime of the pool, and I'll get to the filter in a second, but the runtime is also a factor. So if you notice algae forming in pools and there's some dead areas, let's say the corner and the deep end, there's some algae there, maybe a step in the spa, there's some algae. A lot of it has to do with the circulation of the pool. The more you can run the pool, the better it is, and the more chance you have of having an algae-free environment. So boost up that runtime. If the pool is running 8 hours a day, boost it to 10 or 11 hours. If it's running 14 hours, boost it to 16. Especially if it's a VS pump, you can easily boost that without really impacting the customer's electricity bill. So go ahead and do that and just boost up the runtime. And then the filter also has to be cleaned on a regular basis to prevent algae in the pool. So if you're cleaning the filters regularly, here in California, we have the full-size filter, so we're breaking down the D filters every 4 to 6 months, and the full-size 4 quad cartridge filter every 4 to 6 months. And this will also help tremendously in preventing algae in the pool. So having a clean filter, longer runtime, knowing, of course, the formula, 7.5%, and brushing the pools go a long way in preventing algae. Now, what I would say would take it to the next level, and this is something that I really promote, and I preach this in a lot of my podcasts, and you're going to hear me say this, that using a chlorine enhancer is something that is highly effective in preventing algae out there. Now, there are 3 specifically that I use on a regular basis. You have, of course, borates. You can bring the borate levels of the pool to 50 parts per million, and borates are a natural algistat. The algae cells can't really form with it, and it prevents algae in that way, and it's really effective in making the chlorine more to last longer and have more of a potency. In fact, Bob Lowry has the formula. If you're using borates to 50 parts per million, instead of using 7.5% free chlorine to cyanuric acid, you can use 5%, and that's because the borates are a great enhancer and make the chlorine much more effective. So borates are a great way to prevent algae in pools. The second product that I like using is the PoolRx. It's a copper mineral kind of product, and you put it in your pump basket or skimmer basket. It releases the minerals into the water, and this will prevent algae from forming, and it'll kill algae also. And it's a highly effective mineral technology that prevents algae in pools. And if you use these on your pool route and drop them in April or May, you really have an algae-free pool all season long. In most cases, it's highly effective, and it's a great way to prevent algae in pools, not just for problem pools, but for all the pools on your route, just to prevent algae from forming, and that way you don't have to worry about brushing pools and spending extra time out there on your route. The last product that I recommend, and one season I used this exclusively to test it out. I was like, I wasn't a believer in it. and I was like, I need to try this to see if it works. But it's a combination of using an enzyme and a phosphorus remover in the pool. These two products in conjunction with each other kind of are like a 1-2 punch for fighting algae and preventing it. So the phosphorus remover, of course, putting a maintenance dose every week prevents or eliminates one food source for algae, which is phosphates. And then the enzymes really help the chlorine work more effectively as well. So both of those together are a great way to prevent algae in the pool. And these enhancers work highly effectively. So you want to adopt one of these or a variation of these methods and really promote these with your customer. You can even sell, or your customers, you can even sell these at the beginning of the season as a seasonal algicide. That's what I like to do. I'll just have a one-time charge in April saying it's a seasonal algicide. If you sell the Polar-X, you can maybe charge 110. If you sell the borates, you kind of want to get an idea of how much boric acid to add to the pool based on the size, and then give that customer a one-time charge for that. If you're using enzyme and phosphates, what I like to do is buy the bottles and put them out there by the pool, and I'll just use those at that pool, and I'll tell the customer that these are chlorine enhancers that I'm adding to your pool, and they just have to pay for it every 3 or 4 months, and it's a great way to prevent the algae, and also the customer pays for them, and so that's something that's going to help you out as well. And leaving the bottles there by their equipment is an optical way of showing the customer that this is their product that they paid for and they're using it at their pool. All these are really important factors in preventing algae, and I think regular maintenance is, of course, important, but having these enhancers also is a great way to prevent algae in pools and save you a lot of time, money, and effort out there on your pool route. Let me quickly break down the costs. Let's just say you have 3 pools that week that had algae in them. Each pool is going to cost somewhat, depending on how much chlorine you put in there, of course, and the pool size. But I would say somewhere in the range of $25 to $30 of extra chlorine is, an average fighting the algae. If you're going to really shock it and bring the chlorine level up to 20 parts per million, you're going to need to spend some money to do that. And if you're going to use an algicide, of course, there's a cost associated with that. Let's just say altogether, the algicide and chlorine, I'll just say $25 for that pool. And let's just say you had 3 of those a week, and that means that you had 15 green pools, 15 pools with algae. Hopefully they're not green, and $25 in chemical costs. So that's $375 for that week. It costs you just to bring those pools up with the shock level and some algicide. That's a significant amount of money, and if you times that by a month, of course, you're at $1,200 a month. And you can have employees treating pools with algae, and they're probably a little more heavy-handed, so you could probably add more money to that. But yearly, that's about $14,000 in extra cost because of algae, when you can simply pass all of this cost onto the customers with enhancers. So if you're struggling and you're thinking, well, I don't really want to use Polar-X or borates on my route, if you really do the math, it's going to pay off and save you a lot of time and effort and cost on chemicals by using these enhancers and selling them to the customer. Certainly, you wouldn't spend $14,000 for the enhancers yourself, and it's something that's going to save you a lot of time and money, again, and headaches fighting algae out there, and they're highly effective. So I would definitely recommend getting these products, selling them to your customers so that you're not actually losing that money. You're actually having a net gain because they pay for it. You might have a little markup on the Polar-X or the borates. Plus, you don't have the algae in the pools. You're not putting the extra chemicals in. And it's a big gain for your pool route, for your time and effort. And I didn't touch on the time aspect either. But if you're spending 20 or 30 minutes extra each day fighting algae and treating it, if you do that math, 30 minutes times 5, that you can add probably 5 or 6 more pools a week easily with that extra time. And so this is something to consider as well. You're losing money because you're spending time on pools that you probably shouldn't be, and you're losing money because you're adding extra chemicals to these pools to get rid of the algae that's formed in there, when a lot of times, in most cases, the algae can be prevented by following the steps I outlined here in this podcast. If you're looking for other podcasts, of course, you can find those by going to my website, swimmingpoollearning.com. On the banner, click on the podcast icon. There'll be a drop-down menu with over 1,800 podcasts for you there. And if you're interested in the coaching program, you can learn more at poolguycoaching.com. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a great your week, and God bless. This episode is brought to you by HASA, providing products that deliver clean, healthy water for every aspect of everyday life. The bottom feeder battery-powered vacuum system, portable, powerful, and only weighs 12 pounds. And Skimmer. Get Skimmer, America's #1 pool service software. Podcast listeners can try Skimmer for free at getskimmer.com/poolguy.